Okay, kids, so today we're going to be talking about the preterite tense. Now, the preterite tense is something that's going to be a little bit new to you since you spent the majority of the time in Spanish class working on the present tense. Now, the preterite tense is a completely new tense of verbs, and preterite tense basically means that you are using a tense that is in the past. Now, in Spanish, there are two different past tenses. We have the preterite tense and we have the imperfect tense, and we're going to focus on those in a later video. Today, what we're going to concentrate on is conjugating verbs in the preterite tense. And I like to break the preterite down into 5 separate groups that are a little bit easier to study. So we're going to start with the first group, and that is the regular preterite, or verbs that are completely normal in the preterite tense. So just like with the present tense, we're going to start with AR verbs. And the preterite is similar to the present tense in that in order to conjugate in the preterite tense, you're going to do the same procedure that you've been used to, which is to take a look at your verb, to take off the ending of the verb, that AR, the ER, or the IR at the end, and then to replace it with a new ending. So for AR verbs in the yo form, the ending is E with an accent mark. In the to form, aste. In the ella usted form, o with an accent mark. Nosotros is amos. That is the same as the present tense. We'll talk more about that in a moment. For vosotros, the ending is astes. I know you're used to having an accent mark in vosotros. In the preterite, there is not one. And the ellos, ellas, ustedes form is going to be arron. As I just mentioned a moment ago, you're used to having an accent mark in the vosotros form, but in the preterite, as far as the regular preterites go, the accent marks that you have to worry about are here in the yo form over this E, and in the la usted form over the o. And these accent marks do make a big difference. For instance, if I were to be looking at the verb bailar, and I wanted the yo form. In the preterite, it's going to be baile. If I were to write baile without the accent mark, I'd be using a form of the verb that we call the subjunctive, which you'll study later on in your Spanish careers. Same thing with the accent mark in the la usted form. What's the difference between these two verbs? Nado and nado. I know it's hard to hear the difference between those two things sometimes, but it's there. Nado or nado. Think about it for a moment. What is the difference between those two verbs? This verb, without the accent mark, is the yo form of the present tense. I swim. The one with the accent mark is the la usted form of the preterite tense. He, she, or it, or you, formally, swam. That one little accent mark makes the entire world of difference here. I swim, he, she, or it swam. Okay, so we move along. Okay, so now that we've looked at the AR verbs in the regular preterite, let's move along to the ER verbs and to the IR verbs. Now, one of the first differences you'll notice between the present and the preterite is that in the preterite, ER verbs and IR verbs are the same. I repeat that. ER verbs and IR verbs are the same. In the present tense, AR verbs are one group, ER verbs are a second group, and IR verbs are a third group, although the ERs and the IRs are very similar to each other. In the preterite, we just have two groups. We have the AR groups are one, and ERs and IR verbs are a second group. So for ER verbs and IR verbs, we're still going to follow the same procedure. We're going to remove the ER or the IR from the end of the verb, and we're going to replace it with a different ending. So for ER verbs and IR verbs in the yo form, the ending is going to be I with an accent mark. The to, iste. The la usted form is going to be EO. The accent mark here is going to go over the O, not over the I. Please make sure you're clear about doing that and getting it over the right letter. In my experience, that's the number one mistake in the regular preterite, is that students often put the accent mark in yo in the wrong place. Nosotros is going to be imos. vosotros. Estes, again, no accent mark in vosotros. And the ellos is going to be oyeron. Again, the two accent marks that you have to worry about, just like the AR verbs, is going to be right here in the yo form over the I, and also right here in the LA usted form over this O. Now, you might have noticed one of the things that came up is that with AR verbs in the nosotros form, the ending was amos. In the ER and the IR verbs, the ending in the nosotros form was emos. This creates a small problem for us in that this is also the ending for AR verbs in the present tense, and this is also the ending for IR verbs in the present tense. So the question becomes, how do you tell the difference between a present tense verb and a preterite tense verb if the endings are the same? For instance, if I was using the verb hablar, whether I was present tense or preterite tense, my conjugation would be hablamos. The answer is that you really have to read the sentences contextually to understand what they're saying. For instance, hablamos hoy, we're talking today. Since this action is occurring today, this would indicate to me that this verb here is actually in the present tense. Versus if we said hablamos ayer, because ayer means yesterday, that would indicate to me that this verb is in the preterite tense. So again, when you're dealing with nosotros conjugations, even though the present and the preterite have the same conjugations, you have to read the sentences contextually to be able to know what tense that verb is in. Okay, so finish up the video and put everything into practice that we've just been working on. Here's a few practice questions. So we have the yo and then beber, vosotros, tomar, ellos, vivir, tú en usar, ella en aprender, y nosotros en patinar. So why don't you pause the video for a minute or two, work on these sample questions, and then hit play again and check out the answers. Okay, so hopefully you've taken a minute or two here to practice these questions and you've come back to check out to see how well you've done. So with yo, and we have beber, we have an ER verb, so we're going to take away the ER from the end of our verb here, okay? Leaves us with our stem. And the yo form with ER and IR verbs is an I, so it's bebi. Vosotros, we're going to take away our AR. Our ending vosotros AR verbs in the preterite is astes, and we have tomastes. No accent mark. Ellos, vivir, we're going to take away the IR. Our ending for ellos and IR verbs, or ER and IR verbs in the preterite is oyeron, so it gives me the answer of vivieron. Usar, AR verbs, we're going to take away the AR. Ending is aste, and we have usaste. Ella, aprender, ER and IR verbs, take away the ER. The ending is IO, accent mark on the O, don't forget about that. And we have aprendió. And then nosotros is patinar. We have an AR verb. We're going to take away the AR. Our ending is amos, so we have patinamos. And that is the regular preterite. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me in class.